Probably need a microphone too, huh?
Well, my name is not Tony Pinkham. Tony will be back next Sunday, and I think we're all glad of that, right? But I'm here for today to talk a little bit about Father's Day, which is kind of ironic. This is the first Father's Day I've ever had without my father on the earth. So it's kind of a bittersweet, but you know what? He's in a better place, so that's okay. We're okay. So it was September of 2004, and the audience, the TV audience that was kind of filing in, was all getting kind of excited, anticipating, because there was a rumor spreading about that this TV host, who was kind of known for doing crazy things, was going to do something crazy. So they got their seats, they sat down, and Oprah Winfrey came through the door, and she said this. She said, "Okay, I got something special for you. Everybody look underneath your seats." And they looked under their seats, and you know what they found? They found keys to a brand new 2004 Pontiac G6. Looked like that. So I thought, since Tony's not here, and I'm in charge of the budget, so all you fathers, look underneath the seat. Yeah, actually, there's not anything there. Okay, so there's no prize there. But what I thought was interesting about this whole story was this. As they were getting their keys, the people, of course, were ecstatic, right? This is a $30,000 car. They owed $6,000 in tax, but they found that out later. But the $30,000 car that they got, they came up to Oprah and they said, "You know, we don't deserve this." And Oprah said, "You're right. You don't deserve it." Because, see, deserving has to do with, like, you've earned it, right? And they haven't done anything to have earned that. And then she said something I thought that I needed to think about for a long time. And that's, she said this, "But you are worthy of it. You're worthy of it." And I had to stop and think about that. See, we received a better gift than a car, because that 2004 car is probably, all of them are probably in the junk heap right now, right? But we're talking about our salvation, right? But we know, right, because we've been taught we don't deserve our salvation. And I think we'd all stand up and agree that that's the case, right? We don't deserve our salvation. Are we worthy of it? Are we worthy of our salvation? And so that's what I want you to ponder as we go through this lesson. I'm going to be talking about fathers, and I'm going to be talking about how to grow spiritually. For those of you, there's a little bit of a handout if you want for the test this later, but if you don't have the handout, you'll probably be just fine. I was listening to the radio on Moody Radio, which is, of course, a great source of information. I love Moody Radio, but they were talking about dads and what dads need. And they broke it down into three things, which I think is really true. Here's the three things. It's really simple. The first thing that a father or any man, or actually probably anyone, would need in order to grow are these three things. The first one is personal Bible study. Now, to be honest with you, I've been a Christian a long time, and for many of those years, I read the Bible like a checklist, right? Where I would just check off that I got that done. And that way I say, well, kind of like I was earning something out of reading the Bible. And somebody told me something that kind of, for me personally, revolutionized it. They said this: you don't read it like a textbook, and you don't read it like a dictionary, but you need to spend time in the Word and read it like it's fiction. And I thought, whoa, that's kind of like blasphemous, isn't it, to say that? But he wasn't saying like it's not, don't read it like it's not true, but he said to read it like any other fiction book that you read. And when you read a fiction book, they're different than a textbook, because the stories they're telling are supposed to be telling you something else inside of that story. There's something deeper that you need to wrestle with, right? I remember when reading Mark Twain for the first time, I didn't realize the underlying parts of what that Tom Sawyer had inside of it. The Bible's the same way. You need to read it as though there's something deep that the author wants to tell you. What's the message here behind the words? That's what you're supposed to do. Right now, for example, I'm struggling, and don't look it up now because it'll be a distraction, but I'm struggling with Matthew 11:12. So not now, but when you get home or something, open up Matthew 11:12, and if you have good ideas of what in the world that means and how that affects your life, let me know, because that's what I'm struggling with. But each of us should have something we're wrestling with from the Bible on a daily basis. That's the first thing we need for spiritual growth. The second thing is we need to have small groups. We have to have these small groups where we can seek out what I was talking with Sally about yesterday. We need to have small groups, and in these small groups, we need to have intimate, deep communication about things that matter. We need to have those conversations about what's mattered. If you look at Jesus' life, you can pinpoint a lot of his stuff was, with crowds and things, but the real deep stuff was Nicodemus at nighttime, or the woman at the well, right? Or Peter after he had failed. So those intimate, that's what we're called to do. That's where the Christian life happens, is at those really intimate, small conversations. You need to seek those out on a day-to-day basis. So reading the Bible, get into the Bible, have those intimate conversations. And then the third one might surprise you, and that third one is basically working for others without expectation. Doing things for other people, not expecting anything back. I think sometimes we take for granted something that a lot of the world can't do, and that's that we can be generous not only with our money, but with our time in ways that those who aren't nearly as wealthy as we are can do. We can actually give to others. It's a privilege to be generous. You think about that? Have you ever thought about the privilege it is to be generous with our time? Galatians 5:13 says this. It says, "Don't use your freedom for the flesh. Serve one another, for you are called to freedom, brethren. Only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity to do for the flesh." Don't use the freedom that you have for your own self, but this is what it says instead. Instead it says, "But through love, serve one another." Right? Those three simple things. That'll transform your life. Those three simple things will transform how you live. Now, I want to add one more thing to it, and I want to add more stuff to your list there. But when you read Romans 12, there's another part of the Christian walk that you need to kind of be aware of, and that's Romans 12:1, which says this. In Romans 12, it says, "Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship." Sacrifice. There's a turning yourself over, a living sacrifice. There's a daily dying that takes place. How do you die daily? See, your mercies are new every morning. Remember that verse? Because we're to die daily. We need that mercy because we're dying daily. And what does that mean to die daily? It means losing something. What are we actually losing? How do we sacrifice? How do we count the cost without actually somebody losing something? So daily in our life, we're losing something. And in that process, because I guess maybe I'm sensitive to this, we need to learn, and that's what this message is about. We need to learn how to grieve well. Let me say that again. We need to learn how to grieve well. That's part of what we need to do. There's a grieving process in the daily living, that grieving for the loss. Now, when we look at what we've lost here, we kind of have to compare what the world tells our expectations is. And so we're at the point in the handout where it says basically, how do we grieve well? The first thing we need to do is fight worldly expectations. Because the world's going to tell you you don't have to give up anything. There is no cost to pay. That instead you can have it all. That's a lie. Now, it's funny, it's ironic I'm teaching this because I'm a business instructor, and so I teach marketing, right? And so I teach them how to get into your wallet. Okay, I don't mean to do that, I'm sorry, I apologize now. Okay, I teach them what to say, what to do, how to actually motivate or get them what we want you to be as consumers. And by the way, we've taught you guys as businessmen how to be consumers. You're great consumers. You're the best consumers in the world, okay? And so we have this idea that the world is something we're supposed to get, right? And so in order to get you to do that, we want you to be discontent. Because if you're content, then you won't buy. And if you're content, then you'll be satisfied. We don't want you satisfied. So in the marketing game, it's all about, in some ways, deceiving you and lying to you, right? That's part of what's going on. That deception, that lying. You need to put those voices out of your head. This world is not going to be that perfect utopia that you would get by owning a car, right? It's not going to be that. It's not the cure for what ails you. So the first thing you need to do then, when we're talking about how to grieve well, is get rid of expectations, because those will just lead to false grief and to areas that your life will never be satisfied. The second one, though, is a little deeper, and that's that sometimes we need to get rid of the unrealistic Christian expectations. Do you think we have unrealistic Christian expectations? I think we do. I think I suffered from the idea that there's some kind of a system, that Christianity was a system, right? That if I put the system right in place, I wouldn't have to worry about my kids as far as their well-being, whether they became prodigals, wouldn't have to worry about wokeness, wouldn't have to worry about any of those things because I had the system in place. That's not reality. We need to get rid of that expectation that somehow because we're Christians, these things are not going to touch our lives. They're going to be part of our lives, and we need to accept that. So in order to do that, we need to get rid of the idea that somehow we can, live this Christian life and make sure and guarantee that our children are going to grow up strong and straight. Now, I'm not saying we don't need to do that. We need to do that, but there's no guarantee on that. That guarantee, that lack of guarantee means, guess what? We're going to grieve in this world. There's going to be grief. So how do we handle the grief? So the first thing we need to do is when we're trying to handle the grief is we need to realize it's okay to have that emotion. It's okay to grieve for things, right? And it's also okay to express that grief to the Lord. The Lord can handle it. The Lord can handle your grief. So you need to acknowledge your emotions. You need to tell him how you're honestly feeling. I think the only words that God can accept are lies. And so if this isn't the truth of who you are, why are you saying it? You need to tell him the truth. He can handle the hard stuff. If you don't believe me, read Psalms 88. Man, talking about depressing. I don't know if you ever read Psalms 88. You read Psalms 88? Yeah. Psalms 88 is like, wow. Because most of the Psalms are kind of great because they have the dark stuff, right? Like woe and all this and stuff's going to happen. But at the end there's light. But Psalms 88, you want to know how Psalms 88 ends? I'm going to read the conclusion to all this disparaging things about what's happening in my world and where are you, Lord? What's Psalms 88? What's the end of it look like? Here's what it says. Psalms 88:18. You have removed lover and friend far from me. That hits me really hard every time I read that. Let me say that again. You have removed lover and friend far from me, and my acquaintances are in darkness. That's the end of the psalm. Okay? Is it okay then to have those words with the Lord? Yes, the book of Job. Read the book of Job, right? It's okay. So, get rid of expectations. Acknowledge your emotions. That's all part of that grieving process. That's all necessary. But also remember, we have hope. We don't grieve like the world does. In 1 Thessalonians 4:13, it says that we don't grieve like the world does because at the other side there's a hope to it, right? There's a good side to it. Now, sometimes, by the way, I see it like there's three different kinds of grief. And the first one I'm going to talk about is one where you're grieving, but you deserve it. Okay? Have you ever grieved because you deserved it? I think all Christians can say, honestly, that I have come to a point where I grieved for my sin. Right? There's a grief that's down deep rooted. And we have to be honest and say, this is something, I deserve this. I deserve this punishment, or I deserve these feelings of failure because I have failed. And so the first honest things we ever say to the Lord is this. This is the first honest thing I ever told the Lord. Actually, maybe the first honest words out of my mouth. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. The honesty is, I need you. Those are the first honest words, and there's a grieving process. But it isn't just one moment in time that you're going to grieve. The Christian life is constantly, there's sinning and repentance. When I see CRT, I have a different way of thinking. CRT is critical race theory. I don't know if you've ever seen CRT. If you ever see CRT, think of it this way, though. This is my version of CRT. It's confession, repentance, and trusting. That's what CRT is. There's a continual confession, repentance, and trusting that's part of the Christian walk. It's part of the grieving because you failed and you thought you weren't going to, right? So the first kind of grief that we have to kind of go through and deal with is that fact that we are going to grieve our own sin. But there's another one. The second one is a little bit more troublesome, and that's the idea that sometimes we grieve when it's undeserved. There's undeserved grief. But we can see the purpose in it. So when you have a grief, but you can see the purpose in it, do you see how that encourages you forward? Because if you can see that there's a purpose in the grief, you can endure it, right? You can endure much more tough and torturous events in your life if you know that there's a purpose to it. And so for the example I have is, by the way, for the example for the deserved grief, I put the prodigal son. Okay, because that was deserved grief. And then even when this betrayal I figured was kind of deserved grief. But here we're talking about when we can't, when we get the grief is not deserved, but we can see the purpose in it. And the examples I had for that were, for example, when Paul's conversion, when the first thing after he gets healed from the blindness for being blind, the first thing is as Jesus says, I need to show him what he's going to need to suffer, right? Did Paul suffer? Yes, but was it for a purpose? Yes, it was for a purpose. That somehow makes it easier to endure if we can see the purpose in it. And even the disciples were excited about the fact. Remember when they were brought before the Sanhedrin and they were punished and they basically were flogged. They left, and here's the thing that's amazing. They left and they rejoiced in the fact that they were considered worthy to be punished or to suffer for the Lord. So when you can see the purpose in it, grief is easier to handle. The third one. This is the hard one. Right? When you are undeserved and you see no purpose. That's the hard one. We need to learn how to grieve. How do we grieve in the third situation? And this is, of course, the whole book of Job, the story of Job. And when you see that book of Job, I have 3 little clues that have helped me along the way as I've tried to deal with grief when I don't see any purpose for it. What was the reason for this grief that I'm going through? So the 3 that I have, so basically the person I have for the example is the story of Job. The first thing you need to know is this. It's really helped me a lot. Is that even though we don't understand, we know that this is one reason it's not the case, and that's this. It's not because he doesn't love us. You understand what I mean by that? When we're grieving and we don't know why this happened, we have lots of why questions with the Lord. And we have those just like Job. But we have to remember that at least we know this for a certainty. It's not because he doesn't love us. He loves us enough to send his son and die for us to suffer. So that's one comfort that we have when we're going through that hard trial where we don't see any kind of purpose in it. It's because we know that he still loves us in it. The second one I have has to do with the fact that our grieving is never wasted. The suffering is never wasted, even when we don't understand why they're going through it. Most of you probably don't know me, but I'm a wealthy man. I don't know if you knew that about me, but I have a lot of money. Or not a lot of money, I have a lot of wealth. Okay, I have a lot of wealth. And the beauty of my wealth is it's not some place that it could ever be stolen from. It's not a place that it's ever going to destroy or kind of devalue. Most people are watching the stock market and concerned about inflation. I don't have to worry about that because my wealth is not there. In in the book of Matthew, Jesus tells us to store up treasures in heaven, right? And then in the book of Luke, we're told that Mary treasured these things in her heart. And then in the book of John, Jesus talks about having food that the disciples are not aware of. What is that treasure that they're talking about? You see what I mean? What's that deeper treasure thing? Well, that deeper treasure thing has to do with what we have seen. You know, the book of Hebrews, in Hebrews 11, it talks about seeing these people who have suffered and not seeing the end of their suffering. Hebrews 11 has a list from Abraham, Isaac, Jonah. It goes through all of these people's lives and the suffering that they endured without knowing what the end result was going to be. Those are treasures to us, right? The fact that those who suffered and they went through that, and we can look to them and think, where's hope for us? But in a closer, more intimate way, I have treasures to me. You have treasures to yourself that are in heaven that are even more important than those. I had a faithful father who, even though he struggled, was faithful to the end. I had a father-in-law who basically set aside what his position could be in order to serve. I see Darrell Wicks. There's a treasure we have in heaven. I remember him going through a hard time at this church locally. And I remember him humbling himself in order to make things go smooth. I see Lance, faithful servant. These are treasures we have in heaven. They're treasures that we're going to see again. That gives us hope through that grieving process. But for me, there's one that stands out. A lot of you don't know that my wife suffered with ALS for a number of years. I'm not sure if you know what ALS does, but basically destroys your cells over time, makes you unable to walk or talk. And she wrote me this before she left. And hopefully, pray for me that I can get through this just real well. This is what she said. She says, as I understand it, ALS will push me further and farther away from the world around me. In the end, I won't have use of my limbs, hands, mouth, legs, even lungs, and eating. It will only be my eyes, mind, and ears that function. Even though I will have an audio device to speak, there will be most of my time in my mind alone, as it were. But the Lord was faithful. The Lord gave me the message that He will be in with me, similar to when He formed me in the womb. While He formed me in the womb, He made me fearfully and wonderfully made, Psalms 139:14. So in this, the second of my intimate journeys with Him, the force of a broken world in the form of ALS will dismantle my cell by cell. He will still hold my heart and soul as tightly as He held it in the months He formed me. This is my 57th year of life as Laurie Rachel Huffman Hansen. And God has proclaimed it good in Genesis 1:31. He is already at the end of what she called it was her reformation. Whatever that may be. I read it from her book because she has little hearts in different parts of it. I love to see that. You see that? Her faithfulness is the treasure I have in heaven. Did we understand the grieving? Was it worthless? It's not worthless at all. It's a treasure that I hold in heaven. It's a treasure that each of you have stories that are similar to mine. treasures we have in heaven, that makes the grieving that takes place in this world possible. Now, so we have the first one. We can say this for sure. We know this for certainty. We know that he still loves us. We know it's not wasted. But we also have to realize that there's a different perspective. So, is that on, Alan? Okay. So we need to look at, this is all from the story of Job, okay? And so I'm going to kind of break it down like a business kind of approach here. Because the story of Job, you basically see God in his throne and Satan coming to him and saying this, saying, well, first of all, just like a good dad, God was bragging on Job, right? And Satan says, yeah, but you don't understand. If you take away these things you're giving him, you'll see him curse your name. There's no love there. This is all fake. This is a business transaction, right? So according to our view of things, okay, according to our view of things, good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. That's our view. And that's what Satan was saying. You take away these good things and you'll see who he really is. You'll see Job for really what he is. And then to make matters worse, all his friends join on board and say, yeah, this is how it is. This is the reality. If you must have done something wrong, Job, because you broke the code, okay? You must be bad. That's why bad things are happening to you. And Job kept saying, no, it's not. I'm not, right? So our equation goes like this. Good things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. That's the formula. And then God does this. He says, no, it's like this. Crazy. Okay, let me explain this one. And I'm going to have to kind of break this down. I wish Dana was up here to show you the math side of it. But anyway, here's the graph. So we have on one side, we have good things, good people. And then we have this weird one, good things, but they're bad people. But probably the most troubling is over here, where you have bad things happening to good people, right? And then, of course, we have bad things happen to bad people. They deserve it. We're okay with that. Okay? So, that's how we see it. But the thing is, this bad things happening to good people seems so unfair. Like a violation. And that's why they were so adamant in saying, Job, this can't be. This can't be how the world is because God's good. You have to be a bad person. But Job's saying, no, I'm not. And God says, this is how it is. In this world, sometimes bad things happen to good people. How can we be okay with it? He answers that question. You want to know how he answers that question? Let me show you here. He answers that question because it's possible for bad things to happen to good people, this happens. Can you think of a better example of bad things happening to a good person than the cross? I made it possible for bad things to happen to good people. Why would you do that, Lord? The suffering of Christ. Because until he does that, he can't make this possible. Good things happening to bad people. Guess what people we are? We're in the bad group, right? So because it made it possible for his suffering, made it possible for our salvation. Do you see his perspective? How that opens it up. His suffering made it possible for our good thing to happen to bad people. Isn't that beautiful? See, we were playing tic-tac-toe. He was playing three-dimensional chess, right? He basically had it figured out that this is the only way he could redeem bad people. Because in reality, guess what? There isn't any good people. There isn't any good people. Okay? There's just the one bad who suffered for us who didn't need it. So I go back to Oprah's question that she had. Oprah had that question, right? She said, or what statement she made, and we all agree, we don't deserve, right? We don't deserve anything good, okay? But are we worthy of it? And when I heard that, I had to turn to Revelations, right? I had to go there. So I turned to Revelation 5:2. This is the verse that kind of stuck to me. I'm going to read through it. And as I read through, I might slow down, but I want to read Revelation 5:2. I saw an angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the book and break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the book or to look into it. And then I began to weep greatly because no one was found worthy to open the book or to look into it. Now we need to stop there. We need to kind of put aside that language as kind of a Bible term and take it to heart. What is he really saying? What's this book with seals and all that? That's the thing that's going to make sure that our kids are safe, that we're going to be reunited, that there's a hope of heaven. That book, if it's not open, we have no hope. Why was he weeping? We all would weep. Won't we all weep? But here's the beauty. It doesn't stop there, right? So how does it finish out? Revelation 5:9. And they sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the book and to break the seals. For you were slain and purchased for God, and with your blood men from every tribe and tongue and people and nation are going to be redeemed." So, are we worthy? For some reason, he felt the effort to save us was a worthy endeavor. Don't understand it. But there's only one who's worthy. There's only one who's worthy. Aren't you? Thank you. Let's sing a song about that now, if you don't mind.